Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hope you are having a fantastic Wednesday. Wednesday, hump day. Jeez. Final 53-man roster cuts. All those things have been made. Colts made some decisions. Chris Ballard continuing to fail this Indianapolis Colts organization as its general manager, Destin Adams of A to Z Sports. He covers the Colts. He's going to join me coming up here in about 20 minutes to talk about all of the different roster moves that the Indianapolis Colts made over the weekend. Destin set to join me here in about 20 minutes. Now, Chris Ballard, his approval rating here in Indianapolis just continues to plummet. Down, down, down. And the moves that he made yesterday, oh man, they're hard to believe. And as I was sitting back and seeing everything that Chris Ballard was doing, I couldn't help but think about this thing that I just love. I love to play pickup basketball. Love it. There's nothing better than a good session, a good run of pickup hoops. Okay, when it gets cold and it's, too cold to play pickleball on Saturdays, what winds up happening is I've got a group of buddies. We play at the same place every Saturday morning, and it's an absolute blast. Okay, and there's like a set number of us, like 7 guys that are there pretty much every single week, and then we bring other guys, and we rotate these other guys in and out. So from time to time, we'll have new guys show up, which is cool, right? Like, I like playing with new people. It's enjoyable, just hanging out with different guys, figuring out, who to hoop with and all that kind of stuff. It's an absolute blast. And so when these new guys show up that I've never played basketball with, it's a pretty competitive run. And so when you guys show up, you got to ask them, hey, man, like, what are you good at? What are you not good at? Can you shoot? No, you can't shoot. Okay, well, can you defend? Can you handle the basketball? Like, you have to run through all of those questions because, like I said, it's a competitive run and everyone out there wants to win. And so these new guys show up, you grill them on how good they are. And then one of two things happens. Some are honest and know what they're good at, and others have no clue. All right, and the ones who know what they're good at are an absolute pleasure to play with, even if they aren't very good. Like, there will be guys who show up and they go like, hey, man, I'll be honest, I haven't played in like 2 years. Okay, so I'm probably not going to shoot the ball very well, and I haven't played in 2 years, so I can't really handle the ball. But if you get it to me, like, I promise, like, I'm just going to be smart with the ball. Like, even if you're bad, if you know what you're good at, you are a joy to play with. Because if you're open and you can't shoot, you won't shoot it just because you're open. You'll give the ball up. It's great. I really enjoy playing with people like that. Whereas the guys that don't know how good they are, first of all, those people tend to think that they're better than what they are. That's kind of the first thing that that you realize. It's like, oh, you think you're way better than what you actually are. And those people are no fun to play with, and they're no fun to play against. And oftentimes, they ruin the run. They ruin the fun of getting out and playing pickup hoops. And Chris Ballard is the latter. He is ruining this Indianapolis Colts team. Okay, half the battle of anything in life is knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. For me, in radio, if I tried to do what Dan Dawkins does from noon to 3, I would not be very good. I have to be myself. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. Slowly figuring that out. And so, like, I try to lean into my strengths. And this is what general managers should do. And the more I sit back and the more that I study Chris Ballard, the more convinced I become of the idea that he doesn't know what he's good at. He has no idea. So yesterday, roster cuts come through. And what has Chris Ballard preached through his actions and through his words? Chris Ballard wants to rebuild the Indianapolis Colts through the draft. That is abundantly clear. Okay, he doesn't go after guys in free agency. He's like, we're going to draft. And yesterday, the Indianapolis Colts cut 3 of their draft picks from this previous draft. The Colts got their 7th, 6th, and one of their 5th-round picks yesterday. And usually I wouldn't care about day 3 draft picks getting cut. Okay, it's relatively normal. Okay, it's for guys, drafted in the 7th round to not make the initial 53-man roster. Okay, makes sense. I that, totally get that. But every team is different. Every general manager is different. And when Chris Ballard is your manager, or your general manager, and his entire team building strategy revolves around drafting better than everyone else, then I expect for day 3 draft picks to make the roster and to be better than everyone else's other day 3 draft picks. That has to be what Chris Ballard does in order to rebuild this team, because he's incredibly tentative and going out and signing new players and trading for new players. If this was the Los Angeles Rams GM, who was hyper aggressive, totally willing to go out in free agency and sign players, totally willing to make big trades and even trade away high draft picks to get other players, then I'd have no issue whatsoever with the 5th, 6th, and 7th round pick getting cut. But because it's Chris Ballard, who preaches the importance of drafting and how that's how he wants to rebuild, that he can't afford to have to cut 3 of his draft picks. How can the Colts expect to rebuild and compete for a Super Bowl? Because that's ultimately what everyone in this Colts organization wants, I think. Chris Ballard does. He's going to be looking like Gandalf at some point if he never gets to cut his hair. Right? How can the Colts expect to rebuild and compete for a Super Bowl if they don't sign free agents and they don't draft exceptionally well through every single round? Because the way that Chris Ballard is looking to rebuild this roster, you have to draft well in every single round. Okay? And look, if you aren't going to go get free agents, then you have to draft well. And if you aren't going to draft well, then you have to go get free agents. It's really easy when they both coexist, but when you refuse to do one and only do the other, it makes your life incredibly difficult. Okay? Chris Ballard missed so badly on those 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks from this year that they didn't even have a chance in the NFL. They aren't even going to get an opportunity. That's not true. Some other team may come in and pick them up, but they never even had an opportunity to put a Colts uniform on and play week 1 against the Texans. That's how badly he missed. Okay, so he preaches the importance of draft picks and how, that's how we're going to rebuild. And the other thing that bothers me, and I came in early today because I wanted to find the clip. I couldn't find it, but I will never forget, before the 2024 NFL draft, Chris Ballard went to the podium and he was asked about drafting and all that stuff and drafting philosophies. And he said that they want as many picks as possible because, in theory, the more picks you have, the higher your chances are of getting good players. And that, I remember, I'll never forget when he said it, because it made me so frustrated, because that's simply not true. It's simply not true. The more high draft picks you have, the better your chances are at finding good players. And I sit back and I watch the NFL draft and I see the Colts trade back or make a trade in the offseason. And Chris Ballard's like, hey, we got 2 6th-round picks. Maybe we won't cut them this year. Like something has to change for Chris Ballard. Something has to change for this Indianapolis Colts organization to take this step out of mediocrity, because they've been peddling in it for the last 5 years. Okay, either Ballard has to be more aggressive in the offseason or he has to be more aggressive in the draft. Look, I don't care that he wants to rebuild through the draft. That's fine. Not an issue at all. But rebuilding through the draft with day 3 picks, drafting guys in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round, those aren't the guys that you want to rebuild your roster with. Guys that you draft in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round, most of the time, Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed being exceptions to these rules, most of the time, when you take a guy in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round, they aren't very good. That's usually how it goes. There's a reason why they're still available in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. And when we look at Chris Ballard's drafting history, look, day 3, he's not very good, which is fine because most people don't draft very well on day 3. But day 2, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, Chris Ballard's done a good job. Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Braden Smith, Like, those are three guys on the Colts roster this year that are going to be starters. They're going to contribute. And so Chris Ballard either needs to be a little more aggressive in free agency, go out, sign a safety, sign a defensive back of some sort, because this Colts team is in desperate need of defensive backs. The back end of the defense last year was bad. And when you compare this year's initial 53-man roster to last year's, the only change in the roster from the start of last year to the start of this year is that Tony Brown is no longer on the roster. That is the only change that Chris Ballard made to the secondary, and that simply is not okay. I've got more on that coming here in a minute. I want to stay on this topic that I'm on, of Chris Ballard being more aggressive in the draft. So if you want to trade back and accumulate more picks, that's fine. Just make sure that they're second, third, and fourth round picks, not fifth, sixth, and seventh round picks, because you aren't going to find, most of the time, you aren't going to find good players late in the draft. There's a reason why they're available in the seventh round. It's because nobody wanted them in the previous 200 picks. Okay? If Chris Ballard wants to rebuild through the draft, and that's fine, just do it in the first 3 rounds. Okay, quit trading back to get more 6th round picks. No one cares. 6th round picks usually don't last in the NFL. Oh, well, Tom Brady, exception, not the rule. Okay? Chris Ballard, got to be more aggressive either in the draft or in free agency. There's no other way around it. Okay? Speaking of the cuts, I've got a few that were kind of surprising. So earlier in the offseason, I did this bit where I went to different Colts blogs and I pulled all these different, basically dumb articles. And one of them was from the Horseshoe Huddle telling us to watch out for Evan Hull in 2024. And, he got cut for Tyler Goodson, which was kind of surprising. Like, it seemed like he was kind of the favorite to be the third string running back coming into camp over Tyler Goodson. But from what I read about Colts training camp, from what I, saw in the preseason games, I thought Tyler Goodson outplayed Evan Hull. Just simple as that. I thought that he was simply better from everything that I read and everything that I saw in the actual preseason game. So congrats to Tyler Goodson. Maybe they'll bring Evan Hull back on to the practice squad. We'll kind of see what happens there. I was surprised that the Colts cut Jason Bean because he can not only play quarterback, and by all the metrics, he was the best preseason quarterback out of any of them, which is kind of wild. And I thought of all the backup quarterbacks, he looked the best. I thought he played better than Sam Ehlinger. He was definitely better than Salvis out of USC. I thought he looked the best. And he can also play receiver, right? Like, when he was listed on the roster, he was listed as quarterback / wide receiver. And so I was kind of surprised that they did cut him. But at the same time, like, Sam Ehlinger probably knows the offense better than Jason Bean, because this is his second year in the offense. Also, Kent Sterling, who goes on the Dan Dockett show pretty regularly, at least every Monday from the hour 2 to 3 for the power hour. He made a point that, when he's been out at training camp, whenever Anthony Richardson makes a mistake, Sam Ehlinger's the guy that Anthony Richardson goes to ask questions. So they obviously have a good relationship. It seems like Sam Ehlinger has a decently good grip on the offense, so don't mind that at all. Next, Micah Abraham got cut, which is really surprising. He was a 5th round selection defensive back. Seemed like he was going to be like a backup slot corner. He was, I thought, great in the preseason from everything that we saw. I'm really surprised that they let him go. I'm surprised they only kept 5 cornerbacks on the roster, but I guess one position has to kind of suffer when you keep 10 offensive linemen and 10 defensive linemen. Most rosters keep 9 of each instead of 10, but hey, welcome to a Chris Ballard roster where we're going to keep a lot of big guys. Okay, and that, goes back to Chris Ballard's core philosophy of, when it comes to winning games, he feels like big guys win games, and that's, the big guys obviously play in the trenches. So he wants to keep an extra guy in each position group. Next, they also cut Jalen Simpson. This is another rookie corner like Micah Abraham. I don't know how you can waive two rookie defensive backs, when you have a major lack of depth in that defensive back room, like if the Colts don't make the playoffs this year, it's going to be because of the back. It's going to be because of the back end of this defense and how Chris Ballard has just completely and totally ignored it. This awful secondary last year, they're all back. Like there is not a single change. There's one change from the cornerback room from last year, from the start of last year to the start of this year. The only difference is Tony Brown isn't on the roster. And when you look at the safety position, it is all the exact same guys. And that is an issue for me. And if the Colts don't make the playoffs this year, if they don't win the AFC South, I think the answer is going to be obvious. It's because Chris Ballard completely ignored the back end of this defense. And it's going to be hard to ignore the fact that Chris Ballard was completely unwilling to make a trade for L'Jarius Sneed. So Chris Ballard, got to be better, man. Got to be better. Destin Adams, who covers the Colts for A to Z Sports, he's set to join me coming up next here in 4 minutes on The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket.
Often imitated, never duplicated. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Colts making just a ton of cuts yesterday. Yesterday being cut day. Destin Adams, Colts beat reporter for A to Z Sports, joins me. Destin, what's going on, man?
Hey, I'm doing good. It is the morning after one of the busiest days of the NFL cycle. So hopefully everyone got some rest.
Hey, man, I slept like a baby last night, man. I don't know about you. Up late, just trying to see what all was going on, but it was good. What was your initial reaction just to all the cuts that the Colts made yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest takeaway was, I mean, you've seen it kind of being run everywhere at this point. I mean, the Colts cut 3 draft picks. I thought that was pretty shocking. I think there are times where it makes sense. I mean, a 5th, 6th, and 7th round pick, like, they're not guaranteed to make the roster ever when you're making those selections as a day 3 selection. But I just don't feel like the guys that were above them were heads and shoulders above them as vets to warrant cutting the young guys over. So losing Jalen Simpson, Micah Abrahams, Jonah Lalu, for guys like Darrell Baker Jr. at corner or Taven Bryan at defensive tackle. I personally find that to be a very questionable decision. That was my very early takeaway. But I mean, I think you can also look at the offensive line, defensive line group that they kept, very deep, 10 guys on both sides. And I think both are as deep as we've probably ever seen them. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see what that group looks like in the next 48 hours and see if that gets trimmed a little bit.
Yeah, I was really surprised that they cut Micah Abraham. I thought he was awesome. Like even outside of the forced fumble that he recovered and returned for a touchdown in the first preseason game, I think that's what everyone kind of remembers. But even from just a coverage standpoint, him being, I thought, an eventual replacement for Kenny Moore was really on the table, but I guess Chris Ballard didn't agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he had a really good shot because of his ability to play in the slot. The Colts really don't have anyone behind Kenny Moore at the moment. They let Chris Lamons, the veteran, go as well. I could see them bringing him back, but that was really Micah's direct competition for that backup slot role. And obviously Micah was cut yesterday, a part of those moves. So right now, I mean, if Kenny Moore goes down, I mean, I have no idea who you slide into the slot, which tells me there's going to be moves at that corner spot in the next couple of days, whether that's bringing Chris Lamons back, whether that is picking up some guys on the waiver wire in less than 2 hours from now. We'll have to wait and see what that looks like. But this roster is not a final product.
Yeah, that's the very important thing to remember. Like you said, like the roster, it's not completely set yet. They're definitely going to make some moves, hopefully here in the next couple of hours. Once again, joined by Destin Adams, who covers the Colts for A to Z Sports. So you mentioned them potentially going to the waiver wire and adding a couple different players. Are there any safeties or corners that stick out to you that you feel like the Colts should try to go get?
Yeah, I mean, this guy isn't exactly a proven commodity by any means. But Lewis Kine, a former first-round pick, was cut by the Minnesota Vikings, has had a lot of injuries that have kind of derailed his first couple of seasons. But this preseason, like he was playing his best football. I was honestly shocked to see that they moved on from him so far. I think he's going to be a popular name on the waiver wire. But because he's still on that first-round pick contract, any team that claims him on the waiver wire just picks up that contract where it left off. So that gives the Colts a chance that if they want to go after a player like that, they could at safety. Corner, on the other threshold of it, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers cut a 2023 undrafted free agent in Keenan Isaac. I thought Isaac had a really solid rookie year and then a incredible preseason from the tape that I've been able to watch over the last day. He's a guy that has a long frame, 6'3", has the speed that you would want. I think he would fit what Gus Bradley usually covets at the corner position. So I would not be shocked if he was somebody they looked at adding it for sure.
What about Caleb Farley, the former first-round pick by the Titans who got cut at corner?
Yeah, I think he has the traits that you want at corner that the Colts have usually coveted. I think it's always a positive if you can bring in somebody who has played for the divisional rival at any length. I think the information you get from those type of moves are valuable as much as the player themselves. So I definitely think Farley has some things that you could look at. It'll be interesting to kind of see how it goes here. His coverage skills have struggled, to say the least. The injury concerns are there. But I mean, the Colts have tried to rejuvenate people's careers multiple times over the last few years. So he definitely would fit that mold.
Joined by Destin Adams, who covers the Colts for A to Z Sports, talking Colts cuts yesterday and potential roster moves coming up here in the next couple of hours. Were you surprised that the Colts kept Tyler Goodson over Evan Hull as the third string running back?
I mean, keeping him over him isn't that shocking. I just really thought they were going to keep 4. I really thought all 4 had a shot. I also just don't think Trey Sermon, with his injury, I don't think his spot as the backup is like as guaranteed as maybe as everyone thought. So I think 3 running backs is a very thin line to run with. So I was more shocked that they kept 3 instead of the 4 and let Hull stay on the roster as well. But hey, I mean, during preseason, I think Goodson outplayed Hull. So I think when you use that logic, and no matter if a guy was undrafted, no matter if a guy was a 4th round pick, like I think those things need to matter in competition. And the Colts stay true to that. They say that it's what matters to them in camp. And I think sometimes we don't get to see that come to fruition. So I think a guy like Goodson going out, having a really solid training camp, a really solid preseason, beating out a former draft pick, like I think that's a good way to show that that's not just a phrase you use, that it's actually a way of thought.
Yeah, I thought Tyler Goodson outplayed Evan Hull in the preseason as well, and he's got some explosiveness to him. I was kind of surprised, but I personally like keeping Goodson over Hull because I think he's a little more explosive. Are you disappointed that the legend Jason Bean is gone?
Yeah, I mean, I was really thinking they'd only keep 2 quarterbacks. The day before, obviously, the rule change gets vetoed. That kind of changes everything for all 32 teams, probably caused some scrambling, some different cuts to happen that probably weren't planned. I think it makes sense to keep Ellinger. Ellinger is a vet. I think you can trust Ellinger if he had to play a spot here or there a little bit more than a guy like Bean, who you probably more so want to develop a little bit more before you would feel comfortable letting him take in-game action. So keeping Ellinger over Bean's not that shocking. It'll be interesting to kind of see what the next steps for him are, because I thought he had a really fun preseason. I think his skill set is a fun one that if you could develop could be a really solid backup option long-term behind Anthony Richardson, because I do think you want that long-term backup to have a similar skill set to where you're not having to change the offense so drastically like we saw with Gardner Minshew. And if anything happened to Richardson this year, God forbid, like you're bringing Joe Flacco in, and those are very different styles of quarterback.
Joined by Destin Adams, who covers the Colts for A to Z Sports. I'm with you. I thought they would keep Bean just because when you looked at how he was listed on the roster, he was listed at quarterback/receiver. And I just kind of like the idea of keeping a guy who can, if need be, play multiple spots on the field. It's like I wouldn't say a cheat code, but it's just a way to, in a way, have an extra player on your roster, which is always nice. So I know we've talked a lot about safety and corner. I think that is very much where Colts fans are concerned heading into the season. Are there any other positions that you think the Colts should look into adding depth at, by using the waiver wire?
Yeah, I mean, I think that nose tackle spot is still a big one for me. They did sign Raekwon Davis this offseason, which is hopefully going to add that a little bit. But if anything were to happen to Grover and Raekwon, you're still putting Taven Bryan out there who cannot stop the run. I think having another guy as that 5th spot makes more sense to me than it does to have a guy who is a strictly pass rusher behind Buckner, behind Adatami, also with multiple edge rushers sliding inside at times on pass rush situations like Tyquan Lewis, like Dio Adengbo. I think finding a guy to be that 5th defensive tackle over Taven that can stop the run would make sense out of roster configuration. There's a couple of guys that they could target on the waiver wire for sure. I think there's a couple free agents that could fit that mold as well. It may not be the sexy move that anybody is looking for, but I think finding someone to stop that run as that third spot could be crucial down the line.
What about a linebacker? Because obviously, everyone knows Franklin and Speed. They've been really solid since kind of stepping into those starting linebacker roles. And I'll be honest, I feel like I know this Colts roster pretty well, but I don't know anything about the guys that are backing them up. Any chance that the Colts look to get a little deeper at linebacker?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a spot that Chris Ballard has a proven track record of finding gems at, it's linebacker. But I think they like the group. Zaire, Speed are going to start. They really like what they've seen from rookie Jalen Carlisle's. Has been a little bit more of a coverage type linebacker, a converted safety. Grant Stewart made the roster. He's going to be primarily a special teamer, but he's one of the team's better special teamers. And then they use one of their designated to return IR spots on Cameron McGrone, who's a homegrown talent, but had a really solid preseason. Really looked like he took a step this season. So I think they like their linebackers. We'll have to wait and see if that's a spot that they see a guy on the waiver wire they want to add. But they only kept 5, so there's definitely room for a 6 if they feel the need for one.
So looking at just the depth of the Colts roster, look, everyone knows that every team in the NFL this year is going to deal with some sort of injury, probably to someone important, because that's what happens to every team. Besides defensive line, because I think that's the easy answer for this, what is the position group that you look at where you're like, if someone gets hurt, we're fine with the backups?
Ooh, I mean, that's a good question. Fine with the backups. I mean, I think it's probably their edge room. I mean, I think they have 4 guys that they really feel like they can start at the moment. I mean, that's not counting Samson Ebukam, who is going to start the year on the designated to return IR and potentially miss the entire season. But I think they really like what they've seen from rookie Leatu Latu. I think they're expecting a big jump from Kwity Paye. Tyquan Lewis is coming off his best training camp as a pro. And Dio Adengbo is coming off a really strong season last year with 8 sacks. I think they really feel like they have those 4 guys there that if any of them had to start games, they feel confident in. Isaiah Land is coming off a really strong training camp in preseason as well. So I think they really like their edge room. So I think that's definitely the one I'd go with.
Where's the area that gives you the most concern?
I mean, it's definitely the secondary. I mean, the safety and corners situation is so frugal right now. Very thin. I don't think they have a playable person at safety behind their 2 starters. I mean, Nick Cross is still questionable, but he's having a good preseason, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there. I wouldn't play Rodney Thomas after what we saw last year in coverage. Yeah. Trevor Denbo is a really solid special teamer, but he hasn't been someone that they've trusted to put on the field on defense. So that'd be pretty nerve-wracking if they have to play either of them. And then at corner, they only kept 5 guys. And like I said earlier, no one to be that slot behind Kenny Moore at the moment. Juju and Jalen Jones are the outside guys. And behind them, Dallas Flowers had a really shaky preseason. Darrell Baker had a pretty solid preseason, but we saw him really struggle as a starter last year. So I'd be pretty concerned if we have to play any of the backups in the secondary, which is scary.
It really is. There's a part of me, though, that's like, is there really that big of a drop-off from the starters? Except for, obviously, like, Julian Blackmon, by all accounts, has been awesome. But, like, outside of him, I'm just kind of like, is there really a drop-off? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, if Kenny Moore were to go out, the drop-off there would be pretty significant.
Yeah.
I mean, I would agree with that second outside corner spot with Jalen Jones to the backups. It's probably not a very large one. I think Juju, when he's healthy in camp and practice, you can just tell he's far and away the best outside corner on this roster. Now, whether or not that is a testament to how poor the depth is at that spot right now, or what this second jump is going to be, we're going to have to wait for actual opponents to be across from him. But like during training camp, I think we could see a different player than we saw a year ago. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. But I would agree behind Jalen Jones. If they had to fluctuate between him and those other guys, like there probably would be a major difference, even though I think Jalen had a better preseason.
Joined by Destin Adams of A to Z Sports. He covers the Colts over there. You can find all of his articles on atozsports.com. Also follow him on Twitter at the Destin Adams. So what about the offensive line? Because I heard Ryan Kelly say yesterday before the cuts that this was the most talented offensive line room he's been in since he's been here in Indy. When you look at all 15 guys that they had during training camp, how do you feel about, because obviously I think that the consensus opinion is that this offensive line is going to be really good this year. But, look, it's the offensive line. Guys get rolled up on all the time. How do you feel like the depth is at that, or for that unit?
Yeah, I mean, I think they added a lot this offseason in the draft, using a third and fourth round pick on two guys to add in. I thought Matt Goncalves had a pretty strong outing in the preseason when he was playing right tackle. A little bit more questionable when he slid to the left side, so I think I'd rather him stay on that right side. And then Tanner Bortolini, he was one of my favorite centers in the draft, so I really think he's somebody that they can develop into being a potential starter. I like the young depth on this roster. I think the question is going to be how much proven talent that can come in and play right away is. Because over the last couple of years, I mean, this offensive line has taken a step back to what we've seen them be, which is one of the better ones in the league. But we've seen multiple starters miss games. I mean, last year, Bernard Ryman missed games. Braden Smith missed games. Ryan Kelly missed games. So do you feel comfortable with these young guys coming in and playing right away? If only one of them is missing and you get to play with the other four starters, that helps them tremendously. But if you miss multiple at once and you're putting two younger guys into the equation, like that's when things can get a little bit dicey.
Do you think Anthony Richardson stays healthy this year?
I think it's going to be it's been a priority for him all off season and making sure he does everything necessary to do it. I think he's a very driven young man. I think he knows exactly what he wants to happen. And I wouldn't bet against him. Injuries are so hard to predict though. So we'll have to wait and see. I do think it helps that the injuries he had are not ones that drastically increase your chances of re-injuring. Like once you tear your ACL, like your other ACL becomes significantly harder to deal with. So that's something like to look at. But like that's not what happened with Richardson. With that shoulder injury, we've seen multiple guys have similar injuries and battle back pretty easily. We saw Josh Allen have something like this. We saw Matthew Stafford have something like this. Both of those guys are not guys you worry about today pretty often. So we'll have to wait and see what this year looks like for him. But I think they're going to give him a full go, and he seems ready to still be that dual threat guy.
Man, I hope he is. Once again, joined by Destin Adams of A to Z Sports. He writes and covers the Colts for them. Last question, and I will let you go. Of all the players that the Colts cut, who would you like to see? Give me the three players you'd like to see the most the Colts bring back in like a practice squad role.
So my first would be defensive tackle Joe Nulalu. I really liked what I saw from him in training camp. I think they drafted him in the 7th round. I think he's a little bit more of a developmental piece, a little bit more raw coming into camp, but you can just see the traits that are there that you could mold. So I'm really hoping to get him back. If I had to pick one of Jalen Simpson or Micah Abraham, I think I would go Micah Abraham, but I would like to see both of them back, and we'll have to wait and see how it works out. And then that third one, I'll go with Jason Bean. I think he's someone worth stashing on the practice squad, developing a little bit more, because I really think he has the potential to be like that future long-term backup quarterback, whereas I don't think they have that in Joe Flacco and Sam Ehlinger.
Okay, fair enough. Destin Adams, A to Z Sports. Thanks for your time, man. You were great.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Once again, that is Destin Adams of A to Z Sports. He writes and covers the Colts over there, A2Zsports.com. Follow him on Twitter at the Destin Adams for all of your Colts updates. He was good. Very, very well versed in the depth of this Indianapolis Colts roster. And yeah, let's hope that the depth is as good as he thinks that it is. We will certainly see. The Indiana Fever play basketball tonight. which means Caitlin Clark plays basketball tonight. 7 o'clock, Cambridge Fieldhouse against one of the better teams in the WNBA, the Connecticut Sun. Cannot wait for this game. I am so excited for it. I'll tell you why when we come back here in 4 minutes.
Welcome back to The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks to Destin Adams of A to Z Sports joining me last segment to discuss the Indianapolis Colts and all the roster moves that they have made, in the past, 48 hours or so. So big thanks to him. Now, I have a younger brother, older brother, younger sister as well. One of 4 kids. Jeez, there's a lot of us. But I have a younger brother who loves video games. Just absolutely loves them. Grew up, played them all the time. tried to be a professional, like competitive, like esports guy at one point. He's 21, something like that. He's in school right now in hopes that he can one day work for Ubisoft and make games for them. Like, that's what he wants to do. Like, my youngest brother loves video games, and he's pretty good at them, right? I mean, like, the dude tried to go pro. Like, no, let me take that back. He's really good at them now. But I remember growing up, very competitive family. My dad, older brother, and younger brother and I, we would sit down on our Xbox 360. We had 4 controllers, and we'd pull out Call of Duty, and we put it in, and we would play 2v2. And it was, fun and frustrating, all those things. And so here's what would happen. Whenever we would get a new Call of Duty game, or really any game in general, for the first 2 weeks to a month we had it, my youngest brother he'd be better than I am. That's just kind of the way that it worked. We get it, he'd run around, he'd dominate, he'd be better than everybody, and he would laugh, and he would have a good time, and it was great. Eventually, though, after those first 2 weeks to a month passed, I would figure the game out. This gun's really good. Ooh, this site, this spot on this map, I like being here. I'd play the game, and eventually I would figure it out, and I would surpass him. Right? That's kind of how things always kind of seem to go. And that's where we're headed, and that's what we're going to see tonight from Caitlin Clark. Tonight, 7 o'clock, the Indiana Fever are set to take on the Connecticut Sun at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. This is their last meeting of the year. The Fever are 0-3 against the Connecticut Sun so far this year. And they lost the first game by 21 on the road. Got absolutely torched. Okay, and then the second game here in Indiana at Gainbridge, Fever only lost by 4. And then they lost their most recent game by 17 on the road against the Phoenix Sun. But all 3 of those games came incredibly early in the season. The Indiana Fever played against the Connecticut Sun their first game of the year, their 4th game of the year, and their 13th game of the year. So really early. Okay? Played them incredibly early in the year. In fact, it has been 2.5 months since the last time the Indiana Fever played against the Connecticut Sun. Okay, the Indiana Fever as a whole are much improved from that 13th game of the year. Caitlin Clark herself is much improved from that 13th game of the year that happened 2.5 months ago. And I think tonight, we're going to see the Indiana Fever win, and I think we're going to see Caitlin Clark have a big game. I expect a monster performance tonight from Caitlin Clark. Okay, the Connecticut Sun beat up on her earlier in the year. I mean, like, she was bad against the Connecticut Sun early in the year. The first game that they played, Caitlin Clark was 5 of 15 from the floor with 10 turnovers. Okay, the first game of her career, the Sun just locked her up, made things really tough on her. Second game, she was better. 5 of 11 from the floor, still had 5 turnovers, didn't have that many assists. She was minus 18 in a game that they lost by 4. Okay, like, she really struggled. The Connecticut Sun did a good job of limiting her. And then the last time that they played the Connecticut Sun in the Fever's 13th game of the year, Caitlin Clark only scored 10 points. She only had 2 assists, and she was a whopping minus 30. Okay, she has struggled mightily against the Connecticut Sun, but that was a long time ago. So, like, some of those games happened 3 months ago. Okay, she has gotten better. And what I think we're going to see tonight is proof of the progression that Caitlin Clark has made throughout the season. We're going to see proof of the progression that the Indiana Fever have made over the course of this year on both sides of the basketball. And I find it incredibly hard to believe that the Connecticut Sun are going to limit Caitlin Clark a 4th straight time. It's so incredibly difficult to limit a great player, because that's what Caitlin Clark is. The should be unanimous rookie of the year, the woman who is 3rd and MVP betting odds. Yeah, her. It's hard to keep a player like that from playing well against your team 4 straight times. Caitlin Clark is simply too good of a player, too smart of a player to be held down by the same team 4 straight times. She has improved a lot over the last 17 games. 17 games have happened since the last time the Fever played against the Sun. And I think she's going to give the Connecticut Sun all that they can handle tonight. I think she's going to have a big game. If Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston both have normal games, Aaliyah Boston gets, 15 and 10, I'd say that's a pretty normal game for her. If Kelsey Mitchell, scores 18 points and knocks in a few threes, I'd say that's a pretty normal game for her. Like, in addition to what I think Caitlin Clark's going to do, which is like 25 points, 10 assists, and, 5 rebounds or whatever. Like, I think we're going to see really great things from Caitlin Clark tonight. Then the Fever should win. At a minimum, they should cover the 3.5 point spread. The fact that the spread is only 3.5 is kind of surprising because the Connecticut Sun, last time I checked, I do believe that they are the 2 seed in the WNBA standings. Let me double check that really quickly. Because look, like I said, they're one of the better teams in the WNBA. They are second in the WNBA standings. If the playoffs started today, the Indiana Fever would play against the Connecticut Sun. So tonight's game could also potentially be a little preview of what we could see in the playoffs. We'll see. The Minnesota Lynx are only half a game back of the Connecticut Sun. The Liberty have a 3-game lead over the Sun and a 3.5 game lead over the Minnesota Lynx. So I think we're going to see big things from Caitlin Clark tonight. Okay, like, she's due for a big game against the Sun. She's gotten a lot better since the last time they played against each other. And I just fully expect for us to see all of the things that make us want to watch Caitlin Clark. I expect for her passing to continue to just wow people. And I expect for us to continue to be wowed by the fact that she makes these amazing passes. And then, and then from there, her teammates miss layups like that. I think that'll probably continue to happen. It's going to be, I think, quite fun to watch her play against a really good Connecticut Sun team. I love talking to Tony East, who I probably should have had him on today. We'll get him on at some point about just the different teams in the WNBA. Because look, like, I know a lot about the Fever. That's really it. But when you look at this Connecticut Sun roster, like, there's no like big time incredible star. They just have several really good players. Like, I don't know if you remember the Atlanta Hawks team, like, from like a decade ago, where like all 5 guys made the All-Star team. Like, that's kind of who this Connecticut Sun team is, right? No standalone star, just a lot of really good players. And I'm fascinated to see how Caitlin Clark kind of deals with this Connecticut Sun team that's loaded with a bunch of really good players, maybe no great players. Whereas I would argue the Fever have 3 great players in Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and Caitlin Clark. So it's going to be a really interesting just battle of high-end talent versus depth. I think that's why the line is so close. Only 3.5. Not bad. Not bad at all. When we come back, top of the hour, I've got some college football predictions. I did a list last Friday for Fun List Friday talking about the things that I hope to see for this upcoming college football season. Now I have official predictions: Big Ten winner, SEC winner, Heisman winner, IU's record, Purdue's record. What's Notre Dame going to look like? All those predictions are coming your way at the top of the hour, 11 o'clock, and that is about 5 minutes away. Stay here. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Destin Adams joined me earlier in the show to run through roster cuts. If you want to hear that interview, you can later. Just go to Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. Search for the Real Jonathan Smith podcast, and it'll be up at some point after the show. And look, I love college football. We had week 0 last week. Week 1 starts tomorrow night, North Dakota State, Colorado. That's the headliner. I will personally be watching the Arkansas Razorbacks take on the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. You know, Arkansas 48.5 point favorites there. Don't know if they're going to cover that one, but week 1 college football is here. And so last week on Friday, every Friday, you know, I do my patented Funless Friday segment, right? Usually something a little more fun. I did things that I hope to see during the college football season. I am now going to give you my official college football predictions for the upcoming year. I'm going to give you every conference winner, and I'm going to give you IU's record along with Purdue's record and Notre Dame's. So let's start with the conferences. Let's start with the one closest here to home. Indianapolis will be, I believe that they are hosting the Big Ten championship game once again this year. So who is going to win the Big Ten? The answer to that question is rather simple, folks. It is Oregon. While I think that Ohio State is the best roster in the Big Ten, while I think that Ohio State is really loaded, while I think that bringing in Chip Kelly was a great hire, and while I think that Ryan Day is one of the best coaches in the sport. I mean, Oregon, man. Oregon's loaded this year as well. I think they have a better quarterback in Dylan Gabriel. Really good at Oklahoma last year, transferred up. Obviously, he's playing at Oregon now. And the big thing, though, is Oregon is going to go undefeated while Ohio State drops a game. So Oregon and Ohio State play this year in Eugene. And I think that's going to be the difference. Oregon I think they'll win at home. That game was in Columbus. I would take Ohio State. But since it's in Eugene, I'm going to take Oregon. They win that game. They appear in the Big Ten title game. They beat whoever they play. And Oregon is not only your Big Ten champion, but they are also your number 1 overall seed when the college football playoff rolls around. Next, let's predict the winner of the best conference in college football, the SEC. You have to pick Georgia. If you pick anyone other than Georgia, you're just trying to be cool. That's really all it is. Okay, like if you pick anyone other than Georgia, you're just saying that I want for people to look at you. That's really all that it is. So, look, there's only one guy in the world of college football that has proven that he can beat Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. There's only one guy who's done it. And that guy, Nick Saban, isn't coaching anymore. So how do you pick anyone other than Georgia to come out of the SEC? I expect them to go undefeated, beat everyone in their path, even though I think their schedule is relatively tough. I don't care. I'm not picking against Georgia until someone in the realm of college football can prove that they're good enough to beat them, especially in the SEC. Like the only team that's really done it is Alabama, and that Alabama team was coached by the best football coach ever. No other way around it. So my SEC winner this year is the Georgia Bulldogs. Moving on to the Big 12. The Big 12 is interesting, and I'll give a little more depth on this when I talk about the at-large bids for the playoff. I've got Utah winning the Big 12, but you could tell me it could be Arizona. You could tell me it'd be Oklahoma State. I mean, there's several teams in the Big 12 that are good enough to win that conference, but I'm going with Utah. 6-year quarterback, okay, who's produced, right? Like he probably would have gotten drafted this last year if he hadn't torn his ACL and missed the season, but he's back. Cam Rising, 6th year at Utah. And so good, solid, proven quarterback. We know that he's going to be good. And then Utah has the best coach in the country that no one really talks about, Kyle Whittingham. Okay, like that dude, all he does at Utah is just bring in dudes, put out good defenses, and win football games. That's all he does, okay? Like Kyle Whittingham is awesome, right? And, if you don't want to take Utah and you want to take Arizona, Arizona probably has the best receiver in the country. My one withdrawal for Arizona is their head coach did leave. And anytime you're bringing in a new coach, things can be kind of funky sometimes. So I'm a little hesitant to pick Arizona because of that. That's why I like Utah. There's just a little bit more stability there. Same quarterback, same head coach. So I feel like I know what I can expect from them. I like Utah to win the Big 12. Next, the ACC winner. The ACC is tough. And maybe I'm cheating here. Maybe I would have picked Florida State before the year started. Probably not, because I don't really believe in DJ Uiagalelei, who we saw not play very well last Saturday against Georgia Tech. My ACC winner this year is Miami. Like, they got to figure it out at some point, right? Like, at some point, they have to just figure it out and be good again, right? Like, it happened for Texas. They eventually figured it out, and now they're, one of the better programs in all of college football. Like, eventually, Miami is going to figure it out, and why not this year with Mario Cristobal at the helm? I know Mario Cristobal can coach. I saw him win games at Oregon, and I would argue that it's easier to win in the ACC than it was to win in that Pac-12, right? Because the ACC is pretty light this year. It's Miami and Clemson, maybe North Carolina. I don't know. But I like Miami. I really like Mario Cristobal. And most importantly, though, they got the best quarterback available in the transfer portal. Cameron Ward, a guy who started at Washington State last year. He's now at Miami. The dude can absolutely sling it. Good coach, good quarterback. Mario Cristobal is renowned for his ability to recruit good offensive and defensive linemen. I think that's something that he's going to continue to do, especially now that he's in South Florida, where great big athletes just kind of grow on trees. So I like Miami to win the ACC this year. Now, the way that the college football playoff works is the highest ranked non-power 4 school is, they make it into the playoff. Okay. And I have a question on how this works. I'm assuming Notre Dame falls into this category, but at the same time, they play an ACC/Pac-12 schedule, and they're clearly different from all the other group of 5 teams. So if Notre Dame falls into this category, then they would be my pick to be the group of 5 winner. But if they don't, for whatever reason, because Notre Dame's weird and we just make exceptions for them all the time, I'm going to go off the board. When you hear people predict who the group of 5 team is going to be when it comes to, who's going to make the college football playoff, you're going to hear a lot of people pick Boise State. Shiham Jayaraja of CBS Sports, he came on last week, and he picked Boise State to kind of be that group of 5 winner. A lot of people are picking Memphis. I'm going off the board, taking UTSA. They hired Jeff Traylor about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, right? He's gotten looks for high Division I Power 4 jobs, as he should, because all he's done since he showed up is win football games. First year he was there, they went 7-5. 2021, they went 12-2. 2022, they went 11-3. They went 9-4 last year, and I'm willing to bet that he gets to 10 wins once again this year in a semi-tough American conference. Give me UTSA to be the group of 5 team that represents the group of 5 conferences in the college football playoff. Next, the at-large bids. Here are the, remaining 7 teams that are going to fill out the rest of the college football playoff bracket. Okay. Ohio State, obviously, that's a really easy one. Penn State, I think that's an easy one. Their schedule's softer than some tissue paper, right? They don't play anybody. So Penn State's going to get in. And here's where it gets a little controversial. Alabama gets in. Texas gets in. Ole Miss gets in. Clemson, I think, gets in, and Notre Dame. That means only one Big 12 school is going to make it in, and that's obviously being the winner in Utah. And the reason why I feel that way is because the Big 12 has a lot of teams that are just really even. It's Like, there's not, like, when you look at the SEC, it's pretty, I think at least, I think it's clear that Ole Miss, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia just kind of sit above everyone else in that conference. So, like they're like, I think those four teams are essentially locks to make it into the playoff. Whereas when I look at the Big 12, there's not a team that I look at and I'm just like, yeah, they're hands down the best. They're hands down the second best. Those two teams should get in. Like I think that Utah is the best team, but if you wanted to tell me, that Arizona is going to win the Big 12, then like I wouldn't mind that. If you want to tell me that Kansas State, Oklahoma State, or even Kansas was going to win the Big 12, then like I would have no issue in believing you. I think UCF is going to be halfway decent this year. Like there's just a lot of commotion. There really isn't there isn't much separation in the Big 12 from the best teams in the conference compared to the worst teams in the conference. So I think that that's just a conference that's going to beat up on each other a lot. Like if the winner of the conference went 10-2 and the team that finished second went 9-3, like there's no guarantee that we're going to have a 3-loss team make the playoffs. So I'm a little hesitant to put in a second Big 12 team getting an at-large bid. Heisman winner, Jackson Dart. Starting quarterback at Ole Miss, was last year. He was good last year. He was awesome last year. Okay, like when your head football coach is Lane Kiffin, you're going to put up numbers. That's fundamentally what's going to happen. So Heisman winner, Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. Think he's going to be great this year. He can throw the football all over the yard, and he can run the football all over the yard. Okay, athletic, big arm, checks all the boxes of what you want from your quarterback at any level. Okay, so Jackson Dart to win the Heisman this year. That is my official prediction. Now let's move to the local teams. I'm going to give you the IU record, the Purdue record, and the Notre Dame record right now. IU is going to go 8-4. They're going to lose to Ohio State and Michigan, which I don't think anyone would argue. I also think they lose to Nebraska, and they play Washington late enough in the year that I think that Jeb Fish is going to figure it out by that point, and Washington's actually going to be a semi-tough out. So IU goes 8-4 with their 4 losses coming to Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, and Washington. IU makes a bowl. Kurt Signetti does not finish second to last in the league, finishes somewhere in the middle. That's kind of what I expect from IU this year. 6 wins should happen easily. But I do think that 8-4 is a real possibility. Maybe even 9-3 if they figure out a way to knock off Nebraska or Washington. Nebraska, young, true freshman quarterback. Those guys can be kind of volatile. Washington, new head coach. We'll kind of see how smooth that transition is from Kalen DeBoya, who's now in Alabama, to Jed Fish. So IU 8-4. My Purdue record prediction 4-8. Just flip it. Their schedule brutal. Absolutely brutal. Okay. John M. asking a great question. If I have IU starting off 4-0, maybe 6-0. I definitely have them starting 4-0. Most definitely have that. Like, I don't think that UCLA or any of these other teams are really going to push them. Like, they'll beat FIU. They'll beat Western Illinois. They'll beat UCLA. They'll beat Charlotte. They should beat Maryland and Northwestern. So I like them starting 6-0. Nebraska, that's kind of where my first, they could lose that game. So I do like IU to start 6-0, and then, they'll come back down to earth a little bit because the ending of that schedule, not a lot of fun. Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, Nebraska, those are 4 teams that I think are going to be pretty good this year. Moving on to Purdue, 4-8. I think they lose to Notre Dame, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Illinois, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and IU. Like, they just have an incredibly tough schedule. Like, Notre Dame's going to make the playoff. Nebraska, it's year 2 of Matt Rule. Matt Rule can really coach. From there, like Wisconsin, Luke Fickell, he can really coach. Illinois, Brett Bielema just kind of figures out ways to win. They're going to be really good in the trenches, especially. Oregon's one of the best teams in the country. Ohio State, they're one of the best teams in the country. Penn State's, a top 15 team in the country. And I think we are all in agreement that IU's going to have a halfway decent football team this year. So Purdue goes 4-8. finally the last team in this, well, not the last team, but Notre Dame in the, the last big time team. How's that? In the state of Indiana, Notre Dame, I think they go 11-1. I think they lose this week to Texas A&M, and they don't lose the rest of the way, right? And then, they'll do what Notre Dame does. They'll get into the playoff, and then they'll get their doors blown off by some team that no one thought was very good, because that's just who Notre Dame is. So I won't run you through all of my predictions again, but I will give you my conference champs. Big Ten winner, Oregon. SEC winner, Georgia. Big 12 winner, Utah. ACC winner, Miami. Group of 5 winner, the team that'll represent the group of 5 in the college football playoff, UTSA. Heisman winner, Jackson Dart. IU goes 8-4. Purdue goes 4-8. Notre Dame goes 11-1 with a week 1 loss to Texas A&M. I realize I didn't predict a national champion. I'm going to take Georgia. Carson Beck's pretty good. Kirby Smart's pretty good. As long as we can keep those guys from driving over the speed limit, then I think they're going to be fine. So those are my predictions for the upcoming college football season. Can't wait. More college football starts up tomorrow night. North Dakota State and Colorado kind of headline the slate for tomorrow night. Cannot wait to watch that. Can't wait to see Colorado get their doors absolutely blown off. It's going to be an absolute joy to watch. Something that is not a joy to watch, something that I really dread, to be quite frank, is seeing what Chris Ballard does with this Colts roster. He continues to fail. I'll tell you why when we come back here in 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket. 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show, Indy Sports Ticket. Download the Indy Sports Ticket app wherever you download your apps. Check us out on YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. You can also watch the stream on Twitter. Follow us there at Ticket1430. And if you want, you can follow me while you're there too, at _ Jonathan Smith. And look, if you follow me, you'll quickly learn that I love basketball. Huge basketball fan. Okay. I love to play pickup basketball. It's one of my favorite things. Okay. When it gets cold and I can no longer play pickleball in the morning, I've got a group of guys that I'll play with every Saturday. Every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. We know what we're playing, and the runs are good. It's fun. And there's like a set number of us. You know, there's usually like 7 of us that are there every single week. And then other guys will kind of bring friends and they'll kind of rotate in and out. And it's nice, you know, because you get to play with different people and they're like not in the group, but they're kind of in the group because they know other guys. And it's really nice. It's a lot of fun. When I play pickup with these guys, it gets highly, highly competitive because we're a bunch of dudes in our 20s who have nothing better to do with our lives. And so pickup hoops gets pretty heated sometimes. And so when these new guys show up, the same thing happens every time. I approach them, say, hey, my name's Jonathan, you know, and there's like the pleasantries of like, oh, like, what do you do? You know, we have all those conversations. And then we cut to the chase. I'm like, hey, man, are you good? Are you bad? What are you good at? What are you not good at? Okay. And some guys are honest. Other guys are not. And look, I just want you to be honest and tell me what you're good at and what you're not good at. Because the players who know and understand what they're good at, they're a pleasure to play with, even if they suck, even if they can't dribble, even if they can't shoot. Okay? Like, oh, you can play defense and you'll pass me the ball? Yeah. I would love for you to be on my team. Okay, guys who know what they're good at and guys who don't know what they're good at, man, like your experience when they're on your team is completely different. Because when you play with guys who don't know what they're good at and they're taking jump shots that they have no business taking and they're trying to break guys down off the dribble, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, you're ruining the fun right now. Okay, guys who think that they're better than what they are, guys who don't know what they're good at, are no fun to play pickup basketball with. Okay, they ruin the run. And as I sit back and I watch Chris Ballard run this Colts organization, he is ruining the run. Half the battle of anything in life, no matter what you're doing, is knowing what you're good at versus what you aren't good at. For example, if I sat in this chair every day from 10 to noon and I tried to be Dan Dockich, my show would suck because the things that Dan is good at are not the things that I'm good at necessarily. Okay, so I have to sit here, I have to know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and I'm slowly figuring that out. And I think that enables me to have a decent show. Whereas Chris Ballard doesn't know what he's good at. It's like, Jonathan, what are you talking about? The Indianapolis Colts cut their 7th, 6th, and one of their 5th round picks yesterday. And usually I would not care. Wouldn't care at all. I'd be like, you know what? Day 3 draft picks getting cut. That's pretty normal, right? Like, this is what we expect to happen. Except the general manager is Chris Ballard, who prides himself on his ability to draft players, who preaches the importance of rebuilding through the draft, through both his actions and through his words. His entire team building strategy revolves around drafting better than everybody else. Okay? Like that is his mantra. That is what he claims to do, and that's clearly what he wants to do. And so when you cut 3 draft picks, I have an issue with that. Okay, if this was, the Los Angeles Rams general manager who makes a lot of trades, is highly active in free agency, then I wouldn't care. Because it's like, okay, like you weren't building this team one way. You're using both avenues to rebuild the team. Whereas when we look at Chris Ballard and we look at the Colts, they aren't using free agency. They're only using the draft. Like, how can the Colts expect to rebuild and compete for a Super Bowl if they don't sign free agents and they don't draft well every round? Seriously, like if you aren't going to do one, if you're going to completely ignore free agency like Chris Ballard and the rest of this Colts front office do, then you better draft better than everybody else. Okay, and Chris Ballard missed so badly on these 3 picks that through one training camp and 3 preseason games, he deemed, you know what? No, they're not going to play for us, even though we have one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. 2 of the guys that they cut, two of them are corners. And they drafted them. They're like, you know what? These guys, terrible. Let's move on. Seriously. And like, you can't do that. All right. If your philosophy is we're going to draft better than everyone else to rebuild, then you better draft better than everyone else. The other thing about this that really bothers me, and I couldn't find the clip, but I remember before the draft, Chris Ballard went to the podium and he was talking about drafting and just kind of his philosophy. And he was talking about trading back and how that gives you more picks. And Chris Ballard is of the opinion that he wants as many picks as possible, right? And he basically said that because in theory, the more picks that he has, he feels like he has a better chance of finding good players. And that simply is wrong. It's wrong. Okay? The more high draft picks you have, the better your chances are of finding good players. Okay, something from Chris Ballard has to change. There has to be a shift in philosophy. Okay, either Chris Ballard has to be more aggressive in the offseason and going out and signing free agents and trading for players like, I don't know, L'Jarius Sneed when you need help at corner. He either has to start doing that or he has to start being more aggressive in the draft. I don't mind that Chris Ballard wants to rebuild through the draft. I just wish he would do it a little bit differently. Okay, Chris Ballard gets really excited when he trades down and he picks up an extra 5th round pick. Look, there's a reason why guys are still on the board in the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds. It's because they aren't as good as the guys that got drafted in front of them usually. Okay, so like I don't mind that Chris Ballard wants to rebuild through the draft. Like that's totally fine with me. Can we just do it with not day 3 draft picks? You know, like instead of, you know, trading back and getting 2 extra 5ths, can we like trade back and pick up an extra 3rd round pick? Right? Because like 3rd round pick is more likely to succeed in the NFL. They're likely to be a better player than a guy drafted in the 5th or 6th or 7th round. Right? And so, and the other thing is, if we look at the Chris Ballard draft history and we look at where he's been successful, it hasn't been on day 3. And that shouldn't be a knock because most guys that draft on day 3, like most of those players don't pan out. Most of them don't. Like there's a reason why they're on the board that late. But when we look at Chris Ballard and the success that he's had in the draft, a lot of it has come in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th rounds. Okay, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., Braden Smith, right? Like that's just 3 guys right off the top of my head that are going to start this year and play major roles in the success of the Colts season this year. Okay, the more high draft picks you have, the better your chances are of finding good players. Like that is the thing that Ballard has to get a hold on. Like once again, I don't care if he wants to rebuild through the draft. It's totally fine with me. I would rather him rebuild with young players. Like that makes sense. The issue is the way that he's going about it. You have to rebuild with 1st, 2nd, 3rd, maybe some 4th round picks, not guys taken in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. Okay, I need a little more aggressiveness when it comes to the NFL draft if that is the way that you want to rebuild. Moving on to the cuts that the Colts made. There were some surprises in there, as there always are. Okay, Evan Hull, that was a surprising one. It seems like he was favored coming into camp over Tyler Goodson to grab that 3rd string running back spot. But I thought Goodson outplayed Hull in the entire preseason. I thought he was better with the ball in his hands. I thought he was a little more explosive. Felt like he had a little bit more speed, could catch the ball out of the backfield. I know that Evan Hull can do that as well. I just thought that Goodson was a little bit better, right? And, you know, so much for the horseshoe hut or horseshoe heroes, whatever they're called, So much for that article telling us to watch out for Evan Hull in 2024. The other surprise cut that the Colts made, Jason Bean. I thought of all the backup quarterbacks, I thought he looked the best. Warren Sharp put out that tweet saying basically that statistically, Jason Bean had been better than any other quarterback in the preseason, which I know isn't everything. But the large reason why I thought that they were going to keep him is because he's very athletic. When you look at how he was listed on the roster, it was quarterback / receiver. And look, cheat code isn't the right word, but like having a guy on your roster who can play multiple positions is a nice luxury to have. But it makes sense. Sam Ehlinger knows the offense better than Bean. He's just been in it longer. Okay, it's his second year in the offense. Also, Kent Sterling, who shows up for the power hours on Mondays on Dan Dockage's show from 2 to 3. Kent Sterling sits in and gives us a whole bunch of information because he's out at Colts camp like every day. He said that, when Anthony Richardson makes a mistake, he goes to Sam Ehlinger to get advice. Like, that definitely played a role in how all of that is happening. So was a little surprised that Jason Bean was cut, but ultimately it makes sense. Mike Abraham, very surprised that he was cut. Rookie, 6th round pick, cornerback. Really thought that he had a good shot of being the backup corner to the one and only Kenny Moore. I thought Mike Abraham was awesome in the preseason games. Obviously, the play where he strips a guy, forces a fumble, picks it up, and then runs it back for a touchdown. Like, that play obviously sticks out in our minds. But even just on the day-to-day plays, like just holding up in coverage, I thought he was good. Thought he was a guy who could eventually, follow Kenny Moore and be the Colts starting slot cornerback. But they let him go. They only have 5 corners on the roster, which is a little frustrating. Chris Ballard really bulked up front. They're keeping 10 offensive linemen and 10 defensive linemen. Most rosters only keep 9 as opposed to 10. And when you decide to keep an extra offensive lineman and an extra defensive lineman, a certain position room kind of has to pay the price for that. And for the Colts, it's the cornerback room. I mean, look, it's not surprising. Ballard's completely neglected that area of this team for like the past 2 years, so it shouldn't come as a surprise. The Colts also cut Jalen Simpson, another rookie corner drafted in the 5th round. Look, I don't know how you can waive two rookie corners when you have a major lack of depth and a major lack of production in your defensive back room. And like, you've seen all those guys before. Okay, like if you compare the Colts 53-man roster at this time last year to right now, it's the exact same, except that Tony Brown is no longer on the roster. That is the only change in the Colts secondary, whether it's corner or safety. That is the only change that Chris Ballard has made from last year to this year. And that's a major issue because the Colts secondary wasn't very good last year. But Chris Ballard, he likes his guys unless they're a rookie, I guess. And so I don't get it. It's frustrating. If the Colts miss the playoffs this year, it's going to be because either Anthony Richardson got hurt and he wasn't able to play, or it's going to be because the secondary is terrible. It'll be because of one of those two things. Okay, like I think we're going to look back at the end of the season and we're going to say, geez, if only Chris Ballard had been willing to make a trade for L'Jarius Sneed. I really think that that's how we're going to feel, especially if the Titans wind up making the playoffs. I think that would actually be hilarious. Like, the Titans make the playoffs and it's because L'Jarius Sneed was awesome. I think that'd be so funny, and it would perfectly encapsulate everything wrong with Chris Ballard. There is a lack of aggressiveness in making trades and looking to trade up in the draft. He's just really passive. And look, aggressive wins in sports, not passive. Speaking of aggressive, I'm expecting a big aggressive showing from the one and only Caitlin Clark tonight when the Indiana Fever play host to the Connecticut Sun at 7 o'clock at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. I'm going to tell you why I expect big things from Caitlin Clark tonight when we come back here in 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Head over to YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. Subscribe to the channel. Check out the live stream. Join the chat. We're talking about Kevin McHale right now because someone commented that I probably couldn't guard anyone in the post, and they're not wrong. They are not wrong. I'm a small guy, which is fine. But speaking of guarding people in the post, the Indiana Fever set to play tonight against the Connecticut Sun, 7 o'clock at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Can't wait for the game tonight. I think we're going to see just an awesome performance from Caitlin Clark. And before I get into the game, I have to tell a story. I have a younger brother that just loves video games. Okay, like it is very much his passion. He's in college right now, majoring in computer science. Like he wants to make video games. Like he wants to work for a company like Ubisoft and make games for people, which is really cool. Like as someone who myself enjoys a nice video game from time to time, like I think it's pretty cool. He's texted me the other day. He's got an idea for a game right now, and he was asking me questions about it, and it was fun. But anyway, so growing up, like we played a lot of video games as a family. So I've got two brothers and a dad that's a child sometimes, and so what would happen is we had our Xbox, and we'd buy Call of Duty on a disc. I know some of the young people out there are like, "What? You buy games on a disc? What does that mean?" Yeah, and then like you actually put it in the Xbox, and then it played the game. And we would go to like these private matches, and we would do like 2-on-2. So it'd usually be like me and my older brother against my dad and my youngest brother. And here's what would happen: we would start to play the game, and for the first like 2 weeks to a month that the game was out, my youngest brother Nate would just crush us. I mean, he was just hands down the best player, slide canceling and shooting people, and just like doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But eventually, after 2 weeks to a month would pass, I would spend some time on my own playing the game, figure out, okay, these guns are good for this map. I like hiding in this spot on this map. If we hold up here, it'll be kind of tough to move us out. And I would figure out the game. And once I did, I would be the better player, right? And that is what I think we're going to see from Caitlin Clark tonight. Okay, this is the last time this year that the Connecticut Sun and the Indiana Fever are going to play. The Indiana Fever are 0-3 against the Sun so far this year. They lost the first game that they played by 21 on the road. They lost the second game that they played by 4 at home. And they lost the most recent game that they played by 17 on the road. But all three of those games came incredibly early in the season. The Fever opened the start of the season with the Connecticut Sun. Their 4th game of the year was against the Sun, and their 13th game of the year was against the Sun. Okay, it has been 2.5 months since the last time the Indiana Fever laced them up to play against the Connecticut Sun. Okay, the Fever since then, in the last 3 weeks, the Fever are much improved. Much improved. And Caitlin Clark as well she's improved by leaps and bounds since then. And I think we're going to see a highly entertaining, a highly competitive game. And I think Caitlin Clark is going to have a big night. I'm talking like 25 points, 12 assists, and 6 rebound kind of game from her. Like that's fully what I expect from her, because the Sun earlier in the season, when they played against the Fever, they really beat up on Caitlin Clark. Okay, the first game that the Sun played against the Fever, first game of the year, Caitlin Clark was 5 of 15 from the floor with 10 turnovers. It's not very good. The second game, she was better. 5 of 11 from the floor, had 5 turnovers, which is pretty normal for her. But she was minus 18. Like the Fever just weren't very good when she was on the floor, and the Fever only lost that game by 4 points. Okay, the last time that the Indiana Fever played against the Sun, 17 games ago, Caitlin Clark only scored 10 points, only had 2 assists, She was a whopping minus 30 in that game. It's terrible when she was on the floor. Like, nothing good seemed to happen for the Indiana Fever when Caitlin Clark was on the floor. But she has improved by leaps and bounds since then. She has gotten so much better. Her teammates have figured out how to play with her, most importantly. And I find it incredibly difficult to believe that the Sun are going to limit Caitlin Clark for a fourth straight game. Caitlin Clark is simply too good of a player to be held down by the same team 4 times in a row. Okay, and look, she's gotten a lot better since the last time they played each other, and I really think that she's going to give the Sun all that they can handle tonight. I mean, I think she's going to make things incredibly tough on them defensively. I expect for Kelsey, if Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston have normal games, so, Kelsey Mitchell scores 18 points, Aaliyah Boston has, 15 and 10, and Caitlin Clark plays really well, like I think she's going to, then the Fever should win. Even if they don't, I do think that they can definitely cover the 3.5 point spread. Okay, I really like this Indiana Fever team tonight. I think that they're really going to show out and be one of the better teams, or they're going to look like one of the better teams in the WNBA tonight. The Connecticut Sun, they're second in the WNBA standings currently. Tonight could also be a preview of what the WNBA playoffs look like, because the Fever, if the playoffs ended today, the Fever would play against the Sun in the first round. So a lot of different angles for the game tonight, but ultimately I like the Fever to win, just because you're not going to hold Caitlin Clark down 4 games in a row. It's not going to happen. Just like how a team isn't going to hold down LeBron James or Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson or Larry Bird or any of these other dudes 4 games in a row. It's not going to happen. Like, when you play against great basketball players who have the ball in their hands as much as Caitlin Clark does, she's not going to turn in 4 straight bad games. There's no way that it happens. So Caitlin Clark, Indiana Fever, taking on the Connecticut Sun tonight at 7:00 at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Cannot wait for that game. I also can't wait for the upcoming Indianapolis Colts season. One of the very popular conversations so far this year, just during the offseason, has been Anthony Richardson in the run game. Shane Steichen went on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, and he was asked about Anthony Richardson's ability to run the football and how much he was going to use that this season.
Well, I think this. I don't want to take that out of his game. I know that. That's what he does really well. I mean, are we going to abuse it? No, we're not going to abuse it, but there's going to be a time and a place, and that keeps defense on their heels. I know he likes to run the football. I think, he was rolling there those first 4 weeks. I think he had 4 rushing touchdowns, had some big runs that changed the game for us. So we don't want to lose that element of our offense, and we go from there.
But that said, he was doing it without Jonathan Taylor. I imagine that would change the concepts inside the 10, right, or 15 with him.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a time and place. We'll game plan all those things in the red zone, in the field to play. But obviously, you want to get the ball to 2-8 too, and just hand the ball off to him at times, obviously, because he's a big time runner. Like I said, our O-line leads the way up front, and couldn't be more fired up about that group: the quarterback, running back, and our O-line.
Well, in terms of you saying you weren't going to take the run game away from Anthony Richardson, I think you said something. You don't take the 3 ball away from Steph Curry, right? Is that what you said over there?
That's right.
Did you get any pushback that you should have said Tyrese Halliburton instead?
I love Tyrese, and you know what I mean. I'm just saying, shoot, Steph Curry's the best to shoot those 3-pointers, and Anthony Richardson, I think, could be one of the best runners to ever do it. So I don't want to take that element out of his game.
Shane Steichen, strong phrasing there, big time, not prediction, but just high praise for Anthony Richardson there at the end. Clearly, he thinks highly of Anthony Richardson's running ability. I mean, he literally said that he thinks that Anthony Richardson could be one of the best running quarterbacks of all time. And I hope he's right. I hope Anthony Richardson stays healthy enough for that to happen. The one thing, though, that I took away from that, minute and 30 seconds is it doesn't seem like Jonathan Taylor being back there is really going to impact much of how much they planned on running Richardson. Because look, I mean, even going back to last year, Rich Eisen made a great point. Like, they were running Richardson probably in part because Jonathan Taylor wasn't back there. And obviously Jonathan Taylor is going to be back there at least to start the year this year. We'll see if he can stay healthy. He's missed 13 games over the course of the last 3 years. That is more than Christian McCaffrey, a guy who's notorious for getting hurt. So, I'm very interested to see how much they run Richardson. Because I thought I had an idea 8 to 12 times a game, and maybe more than that, which is kind of incredible. That was kind of my biggest takeaway. If they don't care who's back there with Richardson, man, they're going to line him up and they're going to run him because it is something that he's good at. Like he said, man, he had 4 rushing touchdowns early last year. Like, his legs in the red zone are going to be pretty influential, right? Like, it's an extra thing that the defense has to worry about. And in theory, Jonathan Taylor's running the ball well and Anthony Richardson's running the ball well. It should make it easier for Anthony Richardson to throw the football. So Steichen, clearly he's going to run Anthony Richardson this year. Clearly he has faith in Anthony Richardson's running ability, which makes sense. Like, he should. Like, Richardson ran the ball well when he was at Florida. He's probably ran the ball well his entire life because he's just bigger and stronger and faster than everybody. And so that is still, when it comes to the Colts actually playing games, that is still the thing that I am most interested in seeing Shane Steichen manage. How do you kind of bridge the gap of handing the ball off to Jonathan Taylor versus letting Anthony Richardson run the ball himself? The other thing that he made abundantly clear there, he thinks very highly of this Colts offensive line. I played the audio yesterday of Ryan Kelly saying that he feels like this Colts offensive line room is the most talented room that he's been a part of in his 9 years in Indianapolis. Like, that also speaks to just how good this offensive line is supposed to be. I'm still not sold on it. I want to see it before, I'm get all happy-go-lucky about the Colts offensive line because, look, like, you can look good in training camp, you can look good in preseason games, but I've said it before, I'm going to continue to say it. No one knows anything until week 1 happens. We don't know anything until week 1 of the NFL season actually happens and you're playing under the lights against another team that has game planned for you and you've game planned for them. Because like that greatly impacts the outcome of every game, right? Because like when you show up at these joint practices and you show up for these preseason games, like the way that you prepare for them, the way that you prepare for a preseason game versus a regular season game are drastically different. Like, they aren't even close. Like, the whole week leading up to a game, like, everything you're doing is designed to help beat whoever you're playing, in week 1. So, like, for the Colts leading up to that Texans game, that whole week, everything that they do will be about beating the Houston Texans. Whereas when you're getting ready for a preseason game, you aren't really getting ready for a preseason game. Like, you're practicing and focusing on yourself, trying to decipher who's good enough to stay on the roster and who isn't. Hopefully today we will hear different moves on the waiver wire for the Colts. We'll see what they wind up doing. Yeah, man, I'm really curious. Joel Erickson broke 8 minutes ago that defensive end Jannard Avery signing back to the Indianapolis practice squad. Congratulations, Jannard Avery. So hopefully that news should continue to filter in throughout the day. Tomorrow on the Real Jonathan Smith Show, I'll definitely have thoughts on that. Zach Gray, ZG the Grapevine on Twitter, one of the best sports gamblers that I know. He's set to join me tomorrow at 11 because there's college football games coming up tomorrow night. He's going to give you bets on that. Love it when Zach's on the air. Don't know what time I'm having him on yet, but probably 11 or 11:40. That's kind of what I'm thinking. We'll see what ends up working for him. But stay tuned to the Dan Dockett Show, which is coming up here in about 5 minutes as the Colts hopefully pick up different players off of waivers. Hopefully they do. We'll see if they do or not. We know Chris Ballard. He loves to sit on his hands until they go numb. Oh, man. Hopefully he adds safeties, corners, something of use from the waiver wire. We'll see what he winds up doing throughout the day. Once again, this has been the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thank you for tuning in. Dan Dockett Show coming your way next. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. The Dan Dockett Show starts here in 5 minutes.